but this level of adoration that just like, hey, whatever I have, I'm just going to throw it at you. I'm envious of that.
1-5 is talking about, there will come a day when there's no more tears, there's no more pain, there's no more sorrow, there's no more hurting. I want that.
You love me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. That's one of those things that scares me all the time, because welcome back to Chop for Time. It's been a little while. We took a little week hiatus there with all the
Christmas, man.
Yeah,
December in churches.
Yeah, that plus everyone's been sick.
Yeah,
everywhere. So we're glad to be back, and we're finishing up our series that we had in Surrender. Obviously, there's a couple of ones we missed, so do go back and just watch those sermons. You can see the whole thing. That's all on the website and on YouTube. But today we're talking about surrender to adoration, and what is it that we truly adore? Where is it that we're putting our adoration? Because I think that says a lot about where our heart's at.
Yeah.
And it was a big challenge. You even said in your prep for this sermon, it was one of the ones that was kind of hitting pretty hard.
Yeah, there's been an inherent challenge with all of these messages in this December series of bringing it just naturally challenges us, and I believe God's word convicts us in all of these, but at the same time it encourages as well, and just making sure that I'm finding as much balance as possible, because it's easy to go lean one way or the other, whether it's that conviction or that encouragement. And this one was particularly challenging to really try to make sure that there was somewhat of a balance between the two, because whenever we start thinking about adoration, number one, we don't think about it often. It's like, what do we adore type thing. But then when we really start to kind of dig into it a little bit, then it can get pretty challenging pretty quickly.
Yeah. At the end, you had this share-worthy point that we're going to be focusing in on today, which is, if all of our joy, hope, peace, love, adoration, all of it was there in heaven, and we could have all of it abundantly, but Jesus wasn't there, would you still want to go? Which is an adaptation of, a phrase that we've said here a lot. Many churches have said. I think it might have been Piper that started that little that very provoking question. You were saying we had someone reach out and say, well, if those weren't there, Jesus wouldn't be there. And it's like, well, that's not the point.
Yeah. A couple conversations on that, because honestly, I think it's worth examining, because I think that reveals our motives and our hearts and what we're really pursuing whenever we would entertain a question like that. If the hope, peace, love, joy, expectancy of all of these things were there in heaven, and we could experience all of them, but Jesus were not there, would we still want to go to heaven? And the conversation, which was a good one, a rational one, and one that I encourage was, but if Jesus isn't there, then we're really not going to experience all, hope, love, joy, peace, adoration. All. If he's not there, they're really not going to be there. I'm like, biblically, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. But it's kind of missing, not necessarily missing, but kind of looking at something that the heart of the question is not. It's how much do we really adore Jesus in light of all of these other pursuits? Because if we're looking at it in heaven, it's like, oh yeah, of course I don't want to be there if Jesus is not there, because then all of those other things aren't going to be there. But let's examine how we're living now in light of that. Or how many other areas are we pursuing hope, peace, love, joy currently? Because there's more in my life than what I would care to really go into detail about now. So my motives are being challenged.
Even the flip side of that, of like, are you pursuing Jesus just for the joy, hope, peace, all of these kind of things? Or are you pursuing Jesus for Jesus' sake? And then the fact that you're getting these things is just a ridiculous, unnecessary bonus along the way.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's a very challenging thought, because I think anybody who's just like, oh yeah, I just want Jesus. I think we all say that initially. It's like, you never know what you would do in any actual situation. There's kind of hypothetical situations. Well, if this happened, I would respond this way. It's like, once you start to stop and think, you're like, oh, would I do I really adore Jesus? It's like, well, I mean, even he says, you love me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me, and that's one of those things that scares me all the time, because it's my job for my lips to praise him. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, our lips actually don't represent our heart very often. Do you know what I mean? So it's a very challenging, introspective type of thing.
Yeah. And one thing that we need to be clear on is that it's not wrong to want those things.
Right.
We're instructed biblically to want those.
To pray for them.
Pray for them. And Revelation 21 that we read a couple weeks ago, 1-5 is talking about, there will come a day when there's no more tears, there's no more pain, there's no more sorrow, there's no more hurting. Man, I want that. And I think it's proper for us to want those. However, we have to look at these things through the lens of what or who are we pursuing the most. When we think of adoration, it's that deep love, that deep respect, or deep longing for something. And we saw, we went out of Matthew 2:10 and 11 yesterday, where it was the Magi, the three wise men that came and they laid their gifts, and then they just fell in adoration and worshiped him.
I actually noticed as you read that as well, it's like, it doesn't even imply that they brought him gifts. It just said they got to him, and then they opened their treasures and just gave him gifts. Do you know what I mean? It's like this, like they were in such adoration. It's like this wasn't pre-planned, but it's just they had all these treasures with them, and they said, let's just give this, because clearly this is something special, which is just, I mean, I hadn't really noticed it before, that it just says they opened their treasures and started giving. I always just assumed it was this pre-planned, like, well, if there's this happening, let's bring some gold, let's bring frankincense.
It's a baby shower registry.
Yeah, exactly. But this level of adoration that just like, hey, whatever I have, I'm just going to throw it at you. That I'm envious of that. Because so often I don't have that. I try to pre-plan things, or I give last fruits instead of first fruits, or whatever it might be that we, that's not the right attitude. So often. And it was a very challenging message of where is our main focus, our heart at. We had this conversation while we were away on our little Christmas trip, because Kylie and I, every time we go home to Ireland, because we went home a couple of months ago, so our friends were asking us about the trip. Every time we go home, we're like, we long to be back there. The cliffs, the ocean spray, the pace of life, all these kinds of things. And it's like, so much of that is like, we're longing for that. And then a friend of ours was like, well, God probably has you where you're at, or, maybe he'll send you home, maybe he's not, but you got all eternity. You can ask him to have eternity in Ireland, or wherever you might want to be. It's like, you don't need to worry so much about all of these things right now. Just continue to preach the gospel and chase after Jesus. And I was like, that's such a good point.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's such a good point. I'm kind of hurt by it, actually.
Yeah.
So, and I just think whenever we look at those, I mean, it's a case of semantics in that statement.
Sure.
Truly is. But that's on purpose, just to kind of grab our attention and cause us to pause, because the initial thought is like, well, if those aren't there, if Jesus isn't there, those aren't there. True. But let's evaluate kind of how we're living now in light of that reality that we know is true in heaven. How are we doing with that now?
One of the things that we've tried to shift in our wording with our young people is instead of talking about going to heaven, I keep trying to say, spend eternity with Jesus, to try and harp that home, because I know so much of my upbringing, it was all about getting to heaven for heaven's sake, as opposed to getting to be with Christ for Christ's sake. And it's a hard one to break, But yeah, any closing thoughts on this little?
Just let that statement run a fairly consistent evaluation in your life and in your heart. Just kind of revisit that. If maybe there is a season where you're dealing with sickness or sickness in the family, and that longing of wanting to be in heaven because there's no more sickness. That's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing at all wrong with that. But I do think it would be good for us to time go, okay, am I longing for heaven because of the lack of sickness or because I'm with Christ?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good little litmus test for our hearts.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, we have another video coming out on Thursday. We're diving into another little section here on adoration, and then we're going into a new series next week. So do stick around to hear a bit more about that. And if you've enjoyed the video, do hit the like button, drop a comment down below, so that this can get out to more and more people, and hopefully spread the message of the gospel out there across the interwebs. So I appreciate it. Have a great day.